The coffee had gone cold in Isaiah Brooks' hands when Derek Vaughn's fingers closed around the waitress's wrist like a vice. In that fluorescent-lit diner at midnight, Isaiah had exactly 3 seconds to decide whether protecting a stranger was worth losing everything he'd spent 8 years building for his daughter. The surveillance footage would later show him rising from his booth with the measured calm of a man who'd made harder choices in darker places. What it wouldn't show was the calculation running through his mind. 3 jobs, 1 child, 0 margin for error. But when he saw the fear flash across Lena's face and watched every other customer suddenly find their coffee fascinating, Isaiah Brooks discovered that some lines couldn't be uncrossed, no matter the cost. If you want to see how one man's refusal to look away ignited a war with a billionaire's son and exposed corruption that reached further than anyone imagined, stay with me until the end. And drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The Moonlight Diner had occupied the same corner of Fletcher Avenue for 43 years, its neon sign buzzing with the persistence of something too stubborn to die. At 12:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October, rain hammered the plate glass windows while inside, the smell of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner created an atmosphere of defeated permanence. Isaiah Brooks sat in the third booth from the door, the same booth he'd occupied 3 nights a week for the past 2 years. At 32, he moved with the economical precision of someone whose body remembered training his mind had tried to forget. The Marine Corps tattoo on his left forearm, an eagle, globe, and anchor, usually stayed hidden beneath long sleeves, but tonight the fabric had ridden up while he rubbed at the persistent ache in his right knee. "More coffee, hun?" The older waitress, Doris, appeared with a pot that had been sitting on the burner since 10 p.m. "I'm good, thanks." Isaiah checked his phone. 12 more minutes before he needed to head to the warehouse for his overnight security shift. 12 minutes to sit still, to not be in motion between the construction site where he worked mornings, the tutoring center where he helped kids with math 3 afternoons a week, and the warehouse that paid just enough to keep the lights on. Doris moved away, and Isaiah let his eyes drift to the other waitress working tonight. She was younger, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She moved between tables with a kind of measured grace that seemed incongruous with the chipped formica and flickering fluorescent lights. Her name tag read Lena. Isaiah had noticed her before. It was impossible not to. There was something in her posture, in the way she held herself, that suggested she was playing a part rather than living it. But he'd learned a long time ago that everyone had their reasons for being wherever they were, and his job was to mind his own business. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor who watched his daughter when he worked nights. Amara finally asleep. She tried to stay up reading again. That girl is relentless. Isaiah smiled, texting back a quick thank you. Amara. 8 years old and already smarter than he'd ever been, with her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn determination. Everything he did, every shift he worked, every hour he pushed through exhaustion, it was all for her. The diner door swung open, bringing with it a gust of cold rain and 3 men in expensive suits that had no business being in this part of town at this hour. The one in front moved with the aggressive confidence of someone who'd never been told no, his designer shoes clicking against the linoleum as he scanned the nearly empty diner. Isaiah's training kicked in automatically, the old habits cataloging details without conscious thought. Mid-30s, athletic build, Rolex that probably cost more than Isaiah made in 6 months. The 2 men flanking him had the carefully neutral expressions of people paid to agree. The man's eyes locked onto Lena, and something predatory flickered across his face. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying across the quiet diner. "Elena Dawson slumming it with the common folk. How delightfully authentic." Lena's spine straightened almost imperceptibly, but her voice remained professionally neutral. "I'll be with you gentlemen in just a moment. Please seat yourselves anywhere." "Oh, I don't think so." The man walked directly to where Lena stood, refilling a coffee cup for the elderly trucker in booth 7. "We need to talk about your little performance. Does Daddy know you're playing dress-up down here? Or is this another one of your social experiments?" Isaiah's fingers tightened around his coffee cup. The trucker was suddenly very interested in his plate. Doris had disappeared into the kitchen. The cook turned up the radio. "Sir, I'm working." Lena's voice had taken on an edge, the professional mask slipping just slightly. If you'd like to place an order, I'd like you to drop this ridiculous charade. The man stepped closer, invading her space in a way that made Isaiah's jaw clench. You think you're making some kind of point, proving you're one of the people? He laughed, sharp and cruel. You're Elena Dawson. Your father owns half the tech companies in the state. This? He gestured around the diner with contempt. This is insulting, to them and to yourself. Derek, please leave. Lena's composure was cracking now, and Isaiah could see her hands trembling slightly as she set down the coffee pot. I'm not having this conversation with you. Yes, you are. Derek's hand shot out and clamped around Lena's wrist, his fingers digging into her skin hard enough to blanch it white. Because you don't get to humiliate me in front of the board and then pretend to be some kind of working-class hero. You owe me a conversation about the Northbridge deal, and you're going to... Isaiah was standing before he'd made a conscious decision to move, the distance between his booth and Derek's position closing in 4 measured steps. His voice, when he spoke, carried the kind of calm that came from experience with violence rather than fear of it. Let her go. Derek turned, his expression shifting from surprise to amusement. Excuse me? You heard me? Isaiah kept his hands visible, non-threatening, but his stance was solid. Let go of her wrist and step back. Derek's eyes raked over Isaiah, taking in the worn work jacket, the construction dusty jeans, the discount sneakers. His lip curled. And who the hell are you? Her knight in shining armor? He squeezed Lena's wrist harder, making her wince. This is a private conversation between people who matter. Why don't you go back to your coffee before you get hurt? Last chance, Isaiah said quietly. Let her go. One of Derek's associates, a thick-necked man with a boxer's build, stepped forward. You need to walk away, buddy. You have no idea who you're talking to. I know exactly what I'm looking at, Isaiah replied, his eyes never leaving Derek's face. I'm looking at a man who thinks his money gives him the right to put his hands on someone who doesn't want to be touched. I'm looking at a coward who needs 2 friends to back him up in a diner. And I'm looking at someone who has about 5 seconds to make a smart decision before this goes somewhere he won't like. Derek's face flushed red. Do you have any idea what I could do to you? 1 phone call and you'll never work in this city again. I could destroy your entire pathetic life. Probably, Isaiah acknowledged, but you'll do it with a broken wrist if you don't let her go right now. For a long moment, the diner held its breath. The only sounds were the hum of the refrigerator unit and the rain drumming against the windows. Then Derek laughed, a harsh bark of sound. You think you're tough? He released Lena's wrist and shoved her backward into the counter, hard enough to make dishes rattle. You think you're some kind of hero? The thick-necked associate moved then, his hand reaching for Isaiah's shoulder in what was probably meant to be an intimidating grab. Muscle memory took over. Isaiah's hand came up, redirecting the man's momentum while his foot swept behind the associate's leading leg. In less than 2 seconds, the man was face down on the floor, with his arm locked in a control hold that would break his elbow if he struggled. Don't, Isaiah said quietly, applying just enough pressure to make his point. I don't want to hurt you. But I will, if you make me. Derek's other associate reached for his phone, but Doris had emerged from the kitchen holding her own cell. Police are already on their way, sugar. I called them the minute this jackass started making trouble. Derek's face had gone from red to nearly purple. You have no idea what you've just done. I'm Derek Vaughn. My father's firm manages $2 billion in venture capital. We have senators on speed dial. You think some minimum wage nobody is going to... I don't care, Isaiah interrupted, his voice still eerily calm. I don't care who your father is, or how much money you manage, or who you know. You put your hands on her against her will. That's assault. And when the police get here, you're going to explain why you thought that was acceptable. Assault? Derek laughed again, but there was an edge of panic in it now. I barely touched her. She's fine. You're the one who attacked my associate. I defended myself, Isaiah corrected, carefully releasing the associate and stepping back. The man scrambled up, nursing his arm and glaring. He grabbed me first. You grabbed her first. There's a difference between assault and self-defense. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Derek's expression shifted rapidly through several calculations. Fine, fine. You want to play hero? Let's see how that works out for you. He pointed at Isaiah, his finger shaking with rage. You just assaulted my employee. I saw the whole thing. Unprovoked attack. There's a camera, Lena said quietly, pointing to the small security dome in the corner. Her wrist was already showing the red marks where Derek's fingers had dug in. It caught everything. Derek's smile turned vicious. Technology is wonderful, isn't it? Let's see what the footage really shows. 2 police cruisers pulled up outside, their lights painting the diner in alternating red and blue. Isaiah felt a familiar tension settle into his shoulders. He'd done the right thing. He knew he'd done the right thing, but he also knew that right and wrong didn't always matter as much as money and connections. The next 40 minutes were a blur of statements and questions. The officers were professional, taking notes as Derek spun a tale of an unprovoked attack by an aggressive customer while he was simply trying to have a conversation with an old family friend. His associates backed his story perfectly, their practiced lies smooth as silk. Lena tried to explain what had really happened, showing them her wrist, but Isaiah could see the officers' expressions shift when Derek mentioned his family name. When one of them recognized it, Vaughn, as in Vaughn Capital Management, the dynamic changed subtly. The security footage, when they checked it, showed the incident from a bad angle, much of the crucial moment obscured by Derek's body. It showed Isaiah putting the associate on the ground, clear as day. What it didn't clearly show was the grab that precipitated it. I'm going to need you to come down to the station, one officer said to Isaiah, not quite meeting his eyes. Just to give a formal statement. Am I being charged with something? Not at this time, but Mr. Vaughn is pressing charges for assault on his employee. We need to sort this out properly. Isaiah looked at Lena. She was pale, her arms wrapped around herself, and he could see tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. He looked at Derek, who was watching him with a smile of pure satisfaction. I understand, Isaiah said quietly. He pulled out his phone and texted Mrs. Chen that he'd be late, that there'd been an incident, that he'd explain later. Then he texted his site supervisor at the warehouse, knowing even as he did it that this would probably cost him that job. As the officer led him toward the cruiser, Lena called out, "Wait!" Everyone turned. She was standing straighter now, and something had shifted in her posture. When she spoke, her voice carried a different kind of authority. My name is Elena Dawson, she said, looking directly at Derek. My father is Graham Dawson of Dawson Technologies. This man, she pointed at Derek, grabbed me forcefully enough to leave bruises while I was trying to work. That man, she pointed at Isaiah, intervened to protect me when no one else would. He showed more restraint and professionalism than Derek has ever demonstrated in his entire privileged life. Derek's smile widened. Oh, Elena, always so dramatic. You think your father's name means anything here? You think anyone cares about your little rebellion? This man committed assault. There are witnesses, there's video, and by tomorrow morning there will be charges, a lawsuit, and a very detailed story about a violent veteran who attacked innocent businessmen in a diner. How do you think that plays in the press? You wouldn't, Lena breathed. Watch me. Derek turned to the officers. I want him charged, full prosecution, and I'll be filing a civil suit in the morning for damages and emotional distress. Isaiah met Lena's eyes. It's okay, he said, though it very much wasn't. I knew what I was doing, but he hadn't. He really hadn't. As the police cruiser pulled away from the Moonlight Diner, Isaiah stared out at the rain-soaked streets and thought about Amara sleeping peacefully in Mrs. Chen's apartment, unaware that her father had just made a decision that might cost them everything. Inside the diner, Lena stood with her phone in hand, staring at Derek's retreating back. She dialed a number she hadn't used in 3 months. Dad, she said when Graham Dawson answered on the second ring. I need your help. Actually, someone else needs your help, and it's my fault. The clock on the wall read 2:14 a.m. In 6 hours, Isaiah would be released with a warning and no charges. For now. In 8 hours, he'd discover he'd been let go from the warehouse for missing his shift. In 12 hours, a video would surface online, carefully edited to show only the moment Isaiah took down Derek's associate, with a caption calling him a violent veteran attacks businessman. The story was just beginning to unfold, and Isaiah Brooks, who had only wanted 15 minutes apiece before another long shift, was about to learn that doing the right thing sometimes costs everything. But he'd also learned that sometimes, when you stand up for someone who can't stand up for themselves, you find allies in unexpected places. The rain continued to fall on Fletcher Avenue, washing nothing clean, revealing nothing except that the night was far from over. Isaiah walked through his apartment door at 6:42 a.m. to find Mrs. Chen sitting on his couch with Amara curled against her shoulder, both of them dozing in front of a nature documentary that played on mute. The old woman's eyes opened immediately, that particular alertness of someone who'd raised 5 children and never quite lost the ability to sleep with one ear open. "You look terrible," she whispered, carefully extracting herself from Amara's embrace and replacing her presence with a throw pillow. The girl didn't stir, her small chest rising and falling with the peaceful rhythm of childhood sleep. "Long night." Isaiah set his keys down quietly, every movement heavy with exhaustion that went bone deep. "I'm sorry I was so late. Did she give you trouble?" "That child is an angel, and you know it." Mrs. Chen gathered her knitting bag and cardigan. "But you have that look, the one soldiers get when something bad happened but they're trying to hold it together." "What did you do, Isaiah?" He almost laughed at how well she knew him. "Helped someone who needed help. Made some enemies in the process." She studied his face for a long moment, then patted his arm with surprising firmness. "Good. Better to have enemies for the right reasons than friends for the wrong ones. But be careful. Bad men with money are more dangerous than bad men with guns." After she left, Isaiah stood in his small living room and looked at his daughter sleeping peacefully, her favorite book about planets still clutched in one hand. The apartment was clean but sparse, second-hand furniture, walls that needed painting, carpet worn thin in the high-traffic areas. But it was theirs. He'd worked 3 jobs for 2 years to keep it that way, ever since Sarah died and left him drowning in medical bills and grief. He couldn't afford to lose any of those jobs. Couldn't afford a lawsuit, couldn't afford any of what Derek Vaughn had promised to rain down on him. But he also couldn't afford to become the kind of man who looked away when someone needed help. Isaiah showered quickly, changed into his construction clothes, and left for the Monroe Street development site before Amara woke. He left a note on the counter next to her breakfast. Cereal already in the bowl, covered with plastic wrap, cartoon on the TV set to her favorite channel, and tried not to think about what would happen if everything fell apart. The construction foreman, Big Mike Delacroix, was waiting by the site trailer when Isaiah arrived at 7:30. Mike was built like the iron girders they worked with, all shoulders and calloused hands, but his expression was troubled. "Brooks, my office, now." Isaiah's stomach dropped, but he followed without argument. Inside the cramped trailer that served as the site headquarters, Mike closed the door and gestured to a chair. He didn't sit down himself. "Got a call this morning from corporate," Mike said, not meeting Isaiah's eyes. "Somebody important made some noise about you. Said you got arrested last night for assault." "I wasn't arrested. I was questioned and released. No charges were filed." "That's not what I'm hearing from upstairs." Mike finally looked at him, and there was genuine regret in his face. "Isaiah, you're one of my best workers. Hell, you're probably the best I've got. You show up on time, you work clean, you never complain. But corporate is spooked. They don't want trouble on a job site, and they especially don't want bad publicity. There are investors, insurance concerns, liability issues." "I understand," Isaiah cut him off quietly. "You're letting me go." "I'm being told to let you go." Mike's jaw worked. "I fought it. Told them you've never caused a problem, never had an incident. But they said the decision came from higher up. Way higher. Someone with influence made a call, and that someone wants you gone." Derek Vaughn. Less than 12 hours, and he was already making good on his threat. "When?" Isaiah asked. "Effective immediately. I'll cut you a check for the week, plus a bonus for all the overtime you've put in. It's not much, but it's fine." Isaiah stood, extending his hand. "Thanks for going to bat for me, Mike. I appreciate it." Mike's grip was crushing. "This is wrong, Brooks. Whatever happened, I know you didn't start it. You're not that kind of man." "Doesn't matter what kind of man I am if nobody's willing to hear my side." He cleaned out his locker, packed his hard hat and steel-toed boots into his gym bag, and walked off the site without looking back. 2 jobs now. The tutoring center paid almost nothing, just a stippling of cash under the table to help struggling kids with homework. The warehouse job was already gone. That left exactly zero income starting today. Isaiah sat in his truck in the parking lot and did the math he'd been avoiding. Rent due in 2 weeks, utilities, Amara's after-school program, groceries, car insurance, the payment plan for Sarah's remaining medical bills. The numbers didn't work. They'd barely worked when he had 3 jobs. With 0, they were impossible. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Brooks, this is Elena Dawson. I need to speak with you. Please call me as soon as possible. This is urgent." He stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Whatever Elena Dawson wanted, it couldn't help him now. The best thing he could do was stay as far away from that situation as possible, let it blow over, find new work, and keep his head down. Except the phone rang immediately. Same number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Hello? Mr. Brooks, thank God. Please don't hang up." Elena's voice was rushed, anxious. "I know you probably want nothing to do with me or this situation, but we need to talk. He's doing exactly what he threatened. He's coming after you with everything he has." "I noticed. Already lost 2 jobs." There was a sharp intake of breath. 2? "Isaiah, I'm so sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't been working at that diner, if Derek hadn't known who I was, if he hadn't grabbed you and I hadn't stepped in," Isaiah finished. "Lot of ifs. Doesn't change what happened." "No, but we can change what happens next. My father wants to help. He wants to hire lawyers, cover your lost income, make sure Derek can't—" "No." The word came out harder than he intended. "I don't need charity, Miss Dawson. I don't need your father's money. I just need people to leave me alone so I can find work and take care of my daughter." "This isn't charity. It's rich people solving rich people problems," Isaiah interrupted. "Look, I appreciate the thought, but I can handle this myself. I've handled worse." "Derek has already filed the lawsuit," Elena said quietly. "My father's lawyers got word an hour ago. He's suing you for $500,000 in damages, emotional distress, medical bills for his associate, damage to his reputation. It's completely frivolous, but defending against it will cost—" Isaiah ended the call. His hands were shaking. $500,000. He could work for 50 years and never see that kind of money. A lawsuit like that would destroy him, would follow him forever, would make it impossible to find decent work or build any kind of future for Amara. The phone rang again. He turned it off. By the time he got home, Amara was dressed for school, her backpack sitting by the door, her smile bright enough to hurt. "Dad, Mrs. Chen said you had to work super late. Are you tired? I made you a picture." She thrust a crayon drawing at him, 2 stick figures labeled Dad and Me, standing under a yellow sun, both of them smiling. Isaiah took the picture and felt something crack inside his chest. "It's perfect, baby girl. Absolutely perfect. Can we go to the library after school? There's a new book about Mars I want to check out." "Sure thing. Now come on, or you'll miss the bus." He walked her to the corner, watched her climb onto the school bus with her friends, saw her wave enthusiastically from the window. She had no idea their world was crumbling. She still believed her father could fix anything, protect her from anything, make everything okay. Isaiah went home and spent the morning applying for jobs online. Security positions, warehouse work, retail, anything that might hire him quickly. Most applications had questions about pending legal action. He answered honestly and watched his submission confirmations come back with automated rejections. At noon, someone knocked on his door. A process server handed him an official-looking envelope and left without a word. Inside was the lawsuit Derek had promised, 53 pages of legal language that boiled down to one simple message: "You're finished." Isaiah was reading it for the 3rd time, trying to make sense of phrases like tortious interference and intentional infliction of emotional distress, when his phone buzzed again. A news alert. The headline made his blood run cold. "Violent veteran attacks businessman in late-night diner incident." The article was short, carefully worded to avoid direct libel, but devastating in its implications. It described an altercation at the Moonlight Diner where Isaiah Brooks, an unemployed veteran with multiple jobs suggesting financial instability, had physically assaulted an associate of prominent businessman Derek Vaughn. There was a photo, Isaiah being led toward a police cruiser, his expression grim in the flashing lights. Embedded in the article was a video, 23 seconds of security footage showing Isaiah putting Derek's associate on the ground with what looked like brutal efficiency. The video had been edited to remove all context. No Derek grabbing Elena, no threatening approach, no provocation, just violence. The comments section was already filling up. Most assumed the worst. A few defended him, but they were drowned out by the tide of judgment from people who knew nothing about what had actually happened. Isaiah's phone started ringing, calls from numbers he didn't recognize, reporters probably. His email began filling with messages. Within an hour, the story had been picked up by 3 local news outlets. By afternoon, someone had found his address and posted it online, along with speculation about his violent past and mental health struggles. None of it was true. All of it was damaging. When Amara got home from school, one of her friend's mothers was with her, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Brooks, I just wanted to let you know that, well, some of the parents have been talking, and with the news and everything, we think it might be best if Amara didn't come to play dates for a while, just until things settle down." Isaiah looked at his daughter, saw the confusion blooming on her face, and felt rage kindle in his chest. But his voice stayed level. "I understand. Thank you for bringing her home." After the woman left, Amara asked the question he'd been dreading. "Dad, why did she say that? Why can't I go to Sarah's house anymore?" "Some people got confused about something that happened," he said carefully. "They think I did something wrong, but I didn't. Sometimes it takes a while for people to understand the truth." "What did they think you did?" "I helped someone who needed help, and it made some other people angry." She processed this with the serious expression she got when working through complex ideas. "Like when Tommy pushed Emma on the playground and I told the teacher, and Tommy got mad at me? Exactly like that. But you did the right thing, so it's okay, right? The truth always wins." Isaiah pulled her into a hug so she wouldn't see his face. "Right, baby. The truth always wins." That night, after Amara was asleep, Isaiah sat at his laptop and watched the video spread across social media. The share count climbed into the thousands, then tens of thousands. Each share came with commentary, some sympathetic, most damning. His name was trending in the local area. People who'd never met him had opinions about his character, his choices, his worth as a human being. Someone had found an old photo from his time in the Marines, him in uniform, unsmiling. It was being circulated with captions about PTSD and violence. Another post claimed he'd been dishonorably discharged, which was completely false. He'd served with distinction, earned commendations, left the service with honors after his contract ended. None of that mattered now. The narrative was written, and it had nothing to do with truth. At 11 p.m., someone threw a brick through his living room window. The glass exploded across the carpet, and Isaiah instinctively dropped low, combat reflexes triggering before his mind caught up to reality. When he carefully looked outside, there was no one there, just the brick and a note rubber banded around it. "Violent thugs don't belong in our neighborhood." He boarded up the window with plywood from the utility closet, swept up the glass, and checked on Amara. She'd slept through it, her face peaceful in the glow of her nightlight. Isaiah sat on the floor beside her bed and tried to figure out how this had become his life. His phone buzzed. Another text from Elena Dawson. "Please, my father's legal team can help. Derek is destroying you, and it's my fault. Let us fix this." Isaiah typed out a response. "How?" "The video is everywhere. Everyone thinks they know what happened. Your father's lawyers can't change that." The reply came immediately. "They can if we show them the truth. The diner has backup footage on a secondary system. My father's team is working to retrieve it, but we need your cooperation. We need you to trust us." "Why should I trust anyone from your world? Your people are the ones destroying mine. Derek doesn't represent my world. He represents everything wrong with it." "Please, Isaiah. My father is Graham Dawson. He's not perfect, but he's fair. He built his company from nothing. He knows what it's like to be underestimated and attacked. Let him help." Isaiah stared at the messages for a long time. Pride warred with desperation. He'd survived on his own for 8 years, asked for nothing from anyone, built a life for his daughter through sheer stubborn determination. But brick through his window was just the beginning. The lawsuit would bankrupt him. The publicity would make him unemployable, and Amara would suffer for all of it. He thought about what Mrs. Chen had said. Bad men with money are more dangerous than bad men with guns. If that was true, maybe he needed someone with money on his side. "What do you need from me?" he typed. The response was almost instant. "Can you come to my father's office tomorrow morning, 10 a.m.? Dawson Technologies, the executive floor. Just come talk to him. No obligations, no commitments, just hear what he has to say. I'll be there." He put the phone down and looked at his sleeping daughter. "I hope I'm making the right call, baby girl," he whispered, "because I'm running out of options." The next morning, Isaiah dropped Amara at school and drove across town to the gleaming glass tower that housed Dawson Technologies. The building rose 40 stories above the financial district, all steel and reflective surfaces that seemed designed to intimidate. He'd never been inside a place like this, never had reason to enter the world where people made decisions that shaped entire industries. Security in the lobby was tight, but his name was on the list. A young woman in a sharp suit escorted him to a private elevator that opened only with a keycard. The ride to the 40th floor was silent and surreal. The executive reception area was all marble and modern art, the kind of space that whispered money so loudly it didn't need to speak. Elena was waiting, and she looked different here. Still herself, but somehow more present, more certain. She wore a business suit that probably cost more than Isaiah's monthly rent, her hair pulled back, her posture commanding. "Isaiah, thank you for coming." She shook his hand with a grip that was stronger than he expected. "My father is ready for us." She led him down a corridor lined with photographs. Graham Dawson with presidents, with tech innovators, with Nobel laureates. The man's legacy was displayed like a museum exhibit, each image a testament to influence and power. The corner office was massive, windows overlooking the entire city, a view that put everything into perspective. And behind a desk that looked carved from a single piece of dark wood sat Graham Dawson himself. He was in his early 60s, tall and lean, with silver hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd smiled more in his youth, but had forgotten how somewhere along the way. His eyes, though, they were sharp, assessing, intelligent. When he stood to greet Isaiah, his handshake was firm, but not aggressive. "Mr. Brooks, thank you for trusting us enough to be here. Please, sit." Isaiah sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than his truck. Elena took the seat beside him. Graham remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, looking out at the city. "My daughter tells me you're a man of principle," Graham began, his voice measured and calm. "That you intervened when someone was being assaulted, knowing it might cost you. That you asked for nothing in return and wanted nothing to do with our help afterward. Is that accurate?" "I did what anyone should have done," Isaiah said, "but no one else did." Graham turned to face him. Everyone else in that diner looked away. The cook turned up the music. The other customers studied their plates. You were the only one who stood up. Do you know how rare that is? Doesn't feel very rare right now. Feels pretty stupid, actually. Graham's lips twitched in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Derek Vaughn is making your life hell. The lawsuit, the video, the media campaign. He's doing it because my daughter humiliated him at a board meeting 3 weeks ago. She presented evidence that his firm was overvaluing assets and taking kickbacks from developers. She did it professionally, with documentation, in front of 20 witnesses. It should have been the end of it. But Derek doesn't accept defeat. He's been looking for leverage against my family ever since. So he went after Elena, Isaiah said quietly. He went after a waitress he thought he could intimidate without consequences. Elena's voice was tight with controlled anger. He didn't know I could fight back. But you had no backup, no power, no resources. You fought back anyway. Graham walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. I've had my people looking into Derek's activities. What we've found is disturbing. This isn't the first time he's harassed service workers. There are at least 7 incidents over the past 3 years, all settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements and payoffs. Women, mostly, who couldn't afford to fight back. He slid the folder across to Isaiah. Inside were photographs, documents, legal settlements, a pattern of behavior that turned Isaiah's stomach. Derek has been protected by his family's money and connections, Graham continued. He acts with impunity because he's never faced real consequences. Until now. What does this have to do with me? Isaiah asked. Everything. Graham leaned against his desk. You're the first person who stood up to him without backing down. You're the first one who couldn't be bought off or scared away. And now you're the example he's using to show everyone else what happens when you cross him. So I'm just collateral damage in your family's war with Derek Vaughn. No, Elena said forcefully. You're the person who saved me from being assaulted. Everything else is the consequence of that. But we're not going to let you be destroyed for doing the right thing. How exactly do you plan to stop it? Isaiah asked. The video is everywhere. I've already lost my jobs. Parents won't let their kids near my daughter. Someone threw a brick through my window last night. What can you possibly do about any of that? Graham and Elena exchanged a look. Then Graham pulled up something on his computer and turned the screen toward Isaiah. It was security footage, but from a different angle than the viral video. This one showed the entire incident. Derek grabbing Elena, Isaiah's calm approach, the warning, the associate's aggressive grab, Isaiah's defensive response. It showed the truth. The diner has a backup security system, Graham explained. The owner is an old friend. This footage has been stored on a private server, unedited, time-stamped, and documented. It shows exactly what happened. Isaiah felt hope kindle in his chest for the first time in 24 hours. So release it. Show everyone the truth. We will, Graham said, but not yet. If we release this now, Derek will claim it's fabricated or edited by my people. He'll tie us up in legal challenges. The news cycle will move on before we can prove it's authentic. We need to be strategic. Strategic how? Derek is planning something, Elena said. He's been quiet today, which isn't like him. My father's sources say he's preparing some kind of major move. We need to wait, let him overextend, then counter with evidence he can't refute. While my life continues to fall apart. While we protect you, Graham corrected, I'm offering you a position with my company. 40 hours a week, full benefits, salary that will cover your current income from all 3 jobs. It's real work. I need someone with your background to consult on a new security initiative we're launching. But it also gives you legitimate employment while this plays out, makes you look stable and credible. Isaiah stared at him. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you what you deserve, a fair chance to defend yourself from a powerful position instead of drowning in legal fees and unemployment. And what do you get out of this? Graham's expression was hard to read. The satisfaction of watching Derek Vaughn finally face consequences for his actions, and perhaps the opportunity to prove that not everyone with money is like him. Isaiah looked at Elena. This is what you want? I want you to have your life back, she said simply. I want your daughter to stop being punished for her father's courage. I want Derek to answer for what he's done, not just to you, but to everyone he's hurt. And yes, I want my father to help make that happen. Is that so terrible? It should have been. Everything about this situation should have felt wrong. The rich family swooping in, the convenient job offer, the promises of justice. But Isaiah looked at the footage on Graham's screen, looked at the folder full of evidence about Derek's pattern of abuse, looked at Elena's earnest face and Graham's calculating eyes, and he saw something he recognized. These people were fighters, just in a different arena than he'd known. They played by different rules, used different weapons, but they were fighting nonetheless. If I take this job, Isaiah said carefully, I need it to be real. Not charity dressed up as employment. I won't take money I haven't earned. The job is real, Graham assured him. I've been planning this security initiative for months. I was going to hire consultants at 3 times what I'm offering you. You'll earn every penny. And the legal defense? My lawyers are already preparing a countersuit against Derek for the assault on Elena and defamation against you. That's separate from your employment. Consider it our fight, not yours. Isaiah sat back, thinking about Amara, about the brick through his window, about the parents who wouldn't let their children near his daughter anymore. He thought about Derek Vaughn's satisfied smile and the pattern of victims who'd been silenced by money and fear. When do I start? He asked. Graham smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Right now, if you're willing. We have work to do, Mr. Brooks, and not much time to do it. As Isaiah shook hands on the deal, he didn't know that Derek Vaughn was at that moment meeting with his own team of lawyers and PR specialists, planning something far worse than a simple lawsuit. He didn't know that within 48 hours, his face would be on every news channel in the state, or that Elena would receive threats serious enough to require security details. He didn't know that Graham Dawson's plan wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about destroying Derek Vaughn's empire completely. All Isaiah knew was that for the first time since that rainy night at the Moonlight Diner, he wasn't facing this fight alone. And maybe, just maybe, the truth really would win in the end. Outside the window, the city stretched out beneath them, full of people making their own decisions about right and wrong, courage and cowardice, standing up or looking away. Somewhere down there, Derek Vaughn was making plans. And somewhere else, a brick sat on Isaiah's living room floor as a reminder that the easy road would have been to stay in his booth and mind his own business. But Isaiah Brooks had never been good at taking the easy road. Isaiah's first day at Dawson Technologies started in a conference room on the 38th floor, where Graham's head of security, a former Secret Service agent named Marcus Chen, laid out the scope of the workplace safety initiative with the efficiency of a military briefing. "We're building a comprehensive training program," Marcus explained, sliding a thick binder across the table. "Corporate environments have gotten good at handling overt harassment, but they're terrible at the subtle stuff. The power dynamics, the intimidation tactics, the situations where someone's being violated but nobody wants to make waves. That's where you come in." Isaiah flipped through the binder, scanning case studies and incident reports. "You want me to teach people how to intervene?" "I want you to teach them when to intervene, how to do it safely, and why it matters." Marcus leaned back, studying Isaiah with the same assessing look Graham had used. "You did something most people won't. Not because you're bigger or stronger or braver, but because you recognized a situation that was wrong and you had the training to handle it without escalating. That's teachable." "And you think corporate executives are going to listen to me?" "I think they'll listen to results." Marcus pulled up a presentation on the screen. Dawson Technologies has 6,300 employees across 4 states. Last year, we had 47 reported incidents of workplace harassment. The real number is probably 10 times that. Companies lose billions annually to hostile work environments, lawsuits, turnover, productivity loss, reputation damage. Mr. Dawson wants to fix that, starting with his own company. If it works here, we sell the program to other corporations. Isaiah looked at the numbers, the graphs, the projections. It was real work, actual expertise he could provide. But there was still the weight of everything else pressing down on him. "What about the lawsuit?" he asked. "Derek Vaughn isn't going to drop this just because I got a job." "No," Marcus agreed, "which is why you need to see something." He pulled up a new file, and Isaiah's stomach dropped. It was a dossier on him, not just the recent incident, but everything. His military service record, his deployment history, Sarah's medical bills, his credit score, even Amara's school attendance records. Every detail of his life laid out in clinical detail. "This is what Derek's team compiled," Marcus said quietly. "They're going to use all of it. The medical bills make you look desperate. The multiple jobs make you look unstable. They've even got a psychologist ready to testify that veterans with your combat history are prone to violent outbursts." Isaiah felt rage building in his chest, hot and sharp. "That's not... I know. So does everyone in this room. But they're going to paint a picture, and most people will believe it because it fits a narrative they already accept. Troubled veteran, financial stress, violent incident. It's a story people understand even if it's completely false." "So what do we do?" Elena entered the conference room then, carrying her own laptop and a determined expression that reminded Isaiah of the way she'd looked when she revealed her real identity at the diner. "We tell a better story," she said, taking the seat across from him. "Derek's playing a game he's won 100 times before. Rich man versus poor man, establishment versus outsider. He controls the narrative because he controls the media connections and the money to amplify his version. But he's made a mistake this time." "What mistake?" "He thinks we'll fight him the traditional way. Lawyer versus lawyer, spin versus spin, waiting for the court system to maybe vindicate you in 2 years after your life is completely destroyed." Elena's eyes were bright with something that might have been anger or excitement or both. "He doesn't know we're planning something different." Graham walked in then, followed by two people Isaiah didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a younger man carrying three different phones. Isaiah Brooks, meet Catherine Walsh and David Kim, Graham said. Catherine runs our public relations division. David handles our digital strategy. They're going to help us manage what comes next. What comes next? Isaiah asked, suddenly aware that he'd walked into something much larger than he'd understood. Catherine sat down with the practiced poise of someone who'd handled 1,000 crises. Mr. Vaughn is planning a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. Our sources indicate he's going to escalate dramatically, not just the lawsuit, but a full media campaign. He's positioning himself as a victim of violence, possibly even claiming he feared for his life. That's insane. I never touched him. It doesn't matter. He'll have his associate there, arm in a sling, talking about trauma and fear. He'll have character witnesses. He'll probably have that psychologist Marcus mentioned. It'll be a performance designed to bury you completely. Isaiah felt the walls closing in. So I'm finished. No, David cut in, his fingers flying across one of his phones. You're just getting started. We're going to let Derek have his press conference. Let him commit fully to his version of events, get it on record, make it impossible to walk back, and then we're going to show the world what actually happened. The security footage, Isaiah said. Among other things. Graham pulled up a chair, and for the first time Isaiah saw something in the older man's expression that looked almost like satisfaction. Derek has a pattern. 7 incidents we've documented, probably more we haven't found yet. Women who were paid to stay silent, men who were intimidated into backing down. We've located 3 of them willing to testify now that they see someone fighting back. They'll destroy Derek, Elena added, but only if we do this right. Only if we coordinate everything perfectly and hit him when he's most exposed. Isaiah looked around the table at these people who'd inserted themselves into his life, who were planning strategy like generals preparing for war. Part of him wanted to walk away, to tell them this was too much, that he just wanted his simple life back. But he thought about the brick through his window, about Amara being excluded from playdates, about all the people Derek had heard over the years who'd stayed silent because they had no other choice. What do you need from me? He asked. Graham's smile was sharp. For now, nothing. Go home to your daughter. Show up for work tomorrow like everything's normal. Let Derek think he's winning. The real fight starts after his press conference. Isaiah left Dawson Technologies with a contract in his briefcase, a salary that would change his life, and a sense of being caught in currents far stronger than he'd anticipated. He picked up Amara from after-school care, where the director gave him a long look but didn't say anything about the news coverage. That night he made spaghetti while Amara did homework at the kitchen table, and he tried to pretend everything was normal. She chattered about her science project and the book she was reading, and Isaiah focused on her voice, on the ordinary rhythm of their life together. But after she was asleep, he sat at his laptop and watched the video of himself one more time. 23 seconds that had been viewed nearly 500,000 times now. The comments had grown worse. Doxing attempts, threats, people claiming to know him or his history or his character based on nothing but those edited seconds. He found the website for Vaughn Capital Management and looked at Derek's official photo. The man smiled with perfect teeth, surrounded by the trappings of success, awards, diplomas from prestigious universities, photos with politicians and business leaders. Nothing in that image suggested someone who would assault a waitress or orchestrate a campaign to destroy a stranger's life. Isaiah wondered how many people had looked at that same photo and trusted it, believed in it, invested money or faith or hope in the man behind the smile. How many had been betrayed by that trust? His phone buzzed. A text from Elena. How are you holding up? Honestly? I don't know. This is all bigger than I expected. I know. I'm sorry for dragging you into my family's fight. I dragged myself in when I stood up at that diner. Don't apologize for that. There was a pause, then, my father respects you. That's rare. He doesn't respect many people. He barely knows me. He knows you stood up when everyone else sat down. That's enough. Isaiah set the phone aside and walked to Amara's room. She was sprawled across her bed, one arm hanging off the side, her face peaceful in sleep. He adjusted her blanket, picked up the book that had fallen to the floor, and stood there in the doorway just watching her breathe. Whatever happened next, whatever war the Dawsons were planning, it had to be worth it for this. For her. For the chance that she could grow up in a world where doing the right thing didn't destroy you. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Isaiah spent the morning in meetings with Marcus and the safety initiative team, going over training protocols and scenario planning. The work was interesting, engaging even, but his mind kept drifting to Derek's upcoming press conference. At 2 p.m., Catherine gathered everyone in the main conference room where a bank of monitors showed multiple news channels. Derek's press conference was scheduled for 2:30, and the networks were already running teasers. Victim of veteran attack speaks out, and businessman shares trauma after diner assault. Elena sat beside Isaiah, her expression unreadable. Graham stood at the back of the room with his arms crossed. David was on 3 phones simultaneously, monitoring social media and coordinating something Isaiah couldn't quite follow. At 2:33, Derek appeared on screen, standing at a podium with his injured associate beside him, arm in a professional-looking sling. Behind them was a banner reading Vaughn Capital Cares, which made Isaiah's jaw clench. "Thank you all for coming," Derek began, his voice carefully modulated to sound both strong and vulnerable. 3 nights ago, my colleague James Riley and I were victims of an unprovoked attack at a local diner. We were simply trying to have a quiet conversation with an old family friend when we were assaulted by Isaiah Brooks, a man with a documented history of instability. The lies came smooth and practiced. Derek described being terrified by Isaiah's aggressive approach and James's permanent damage from the restraint hold. He talked about trauma and fear and the failure of the system to protect innocent people from violence. "Mr. Brooks is a veteran," Derek said, "and we honor his service. But we cannot ignore the reality that some veterans struggle with anger issues and violent tendencies. The military trains people to respond with force, and sometimes that training doesn't translate well to civilian life." Isaiah felt Elena's hand on his arm, steadying. Derek continued, building to his conclusion. "I'm here today, not just for myself, but for every person who has been victimized by violence and then attacked again by those who question their story. I'm filing a civil suit for $500,000, not because I need the money, but because Mr. Brooks needs to understand that actions have consequences. And I'm calling on the district attorney to press criminal charges for assault." The press conference devolved into questions, and Derek handled them perfectly. Humble, concerned, wounded, but resilient. He mentioned Isaiah's financial troubles, his multiple jobs, the instability that made him dangerous. Every word was carefully chosen to destroy, without crossing the line into actionable defamation. When it ended, the news anchors immediately began analysis, and most of it favored Derek's narrative. He'd performed brilliantly, giving them exactly the story they wanted. The successful businessman traumatized by random violence, the veteran who couldn't adjust to civilian life. "He's good," Marcus observed. "I'll give him that. Very good." "He's had practice," Graham said, his voice cold. "David, how's the response looking?" David's fingers flew across his keyboard. "His hashtag is trending. The video's getting shared again. Public sentiment is running about 70-30 against Isaiah. Some veterans groups are defending him, but they're being drowned out." Isaiah watched the numbers tick up on social media, watched the comments flood in, watched his name become synonymous with violence and instability in real time. Part of him wanted to leave, to not watch his own destruction play out on screens. But another part needed to see it, needed to understand exactly what Derek had done so he could appreciate what came next. "All right," Graham said, checking his watch. "Catherine, are we ready?" "We're ready. The footage is verified, time-stamped, and legally documented. We have sworn statements from the diner owner and 3 independent witnesses. The other victims are prepared to come forward. David has the social media campaign ready to launch. Then let's show them the truth." What happened next unfolded with the precision of a military operation. David's team began uploading the full, unedited security footage to multiple platforms simultaneously. The complete video showing Derek grabbing Elena, Isaiah's calm warnings, the associate's aggressive approach, everything Derek had edited out. Within minutes, Catherine's media contacts were receiving detailed press packets containing the footage, witness statements, and documentation of Derek's pattern of harassment. The 3 previous victims released coordinated statements describing their own experiences with Derek, the intimidation, the settlements, the fear that had kept them silent. Elena posted on her own social media, something she rarely did, with a simple message. Derek Vaughn assaulted me at my workplace. Isaiah Brooks protected me when no one else would. Here's what actually happened. The full video began to spread, and the response was immediate and visceral. People who'd condemned Isaiah hours earlier were now sharing the new footage with apologies and outrage. The news networks scrambled to cover the developing story, their anchors stammering through corrections and updates. Derek's phone started ringing on camera. He was doing a follow-up interview with a local station when the footage dropped, and Isaiah watched his expression shift from confident to confused to panicked as his assistant whispered in his ear. "No comment," Derek said, standing abruptly. "This interview is over." But it was too late. The internet had already made its judgment, and this time Derek was the one being condemned. The hashtags shifted. The narrative flipped. Within 2 hours, Derek Vaughn went from victim to villain. His press conference transformed from a moment of sympathy to evidence of manipulation. By evening, 2 major clients had severed ties with Vaughn Capital Management. By midnight, 3 board members had resigned. Derek's carefully constructed image was collapsing in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Isaiah watched it all from the conference room, surrounded by Graham's team, feeling surreal and detached. This was justice, he supposed. This was what happened when the truth finally came out. But it felt strange, watching someone's life implode on screens and social media, even someone who'd tried to destroy him first. "How do you feel?" Elena asked quietly. "I don't know," Isaiah admitted. "Relieved, I guess. Vindicated. But also kind of sick. I didn't want to destroy him. I just wanted him to leave me alone." "He wouldn't have left you alone," Graham said, appearing beside them. "Men like Derek don't stop until they're stopped. You gave him the chance to walk away when you warned him at that diner. He chose this path." Isaiah's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Brooks?" A professional voice, female, official sounding. "This is Rebecca Marsh with the District Attorney's Office. I'm calling to inform you that we've reviewed the new evidence in your case. We'll be filing charges against Derek Vaughn for assault and harassment. We'd also like to discuss the intimidation campaign against you and whether it constitutes witness tampering." Isaiah met Graham's eyes across the table. The older man nodded once. "I'm listening," Isaiah said. After the call ended, he sat back and let the reality settle over him. The charges would be dropped. His name would be cleared. The lawsuit would disappear. Everything Derek had tried to do to him was being reversed, undone, transformed into consequences for Derek instead. But the damage wasn't completely erased. The video of him restraining the associate would always exist online, always be findable by anyone who searched his name. Some people would always believe the first version they saw, would never bother to check for the truth. His life wouldn't just snap back to normal because the narrative had shifted. "We're not done," Graham said, as if reading his thoughts. "The legal victory is just the beginning. Tomorrow, we announce the expansion of the Workplace Safety Initiative with you as the face of it. We do interviews, we tell your story properly, we make sure that when people search your name, they find the truth first." "I'm not good at interviews," Isaiah said. "You don't need to be good at them. You just need to be honest." Elena pulled up a schedule on her tablet. "We've got 3 major networks interested, 2 podcast interviews, and a feature in a business magazine. All of them want to talk to the man who stood up to Derek Vaughn." "I didn't stand up to Derek Vaughn. I helped a woman who was being assaulted." "Exactly," Catherine said. "That's the story. That's what you say in every interview. You keep it simple, keep it honest, keep it focused on the principle rather than the personalities. People will respond to that." Isaiah looked at the schedule, at the strategic plan laid out to rebuild his reputation and transform him from victim to advocate. It was smart, thorough, and probably necessary, but it was also overwhelming. "I need some air," he said, standing abruptly. He found his way to a balcony on the 39th floor, stepping out into the cool evening air. The city spread out below him, lights beginning to twinkle as dusk settled. Somewhere down there, Derek Vaughn was probably in crisis meetings with his own team, scrambling to contain the damage. Somewhere else, people were having dinner, watching television, living their lives completely unaware of the small war that had been fought and won in boardrooms and on social media. Elena joined him on the balcony, standing quietly beside him for a long moment before speaking. "You saved my life that night," she said softly. "Maybe not literally, but you saved me from something terrible. And you did it knowing it would cost you. That matters, Isaiah. It matters more than you probably realize. I just did what anyone should do. But no one else did. That's the point." She turned to face him, and in the fading light he could see the earnestness in her expression. "My father built an empire from nothing. He's brilliant and ruthless and fair in his own way. But he's also forgotten what it's like to be powerless, to be the person who has to choose between doing right and surviving. You reminded him. You reminded all of us. I didn't ask to be anyone's reminder. I know, that's what makes it matter." They stood in silence for a while, watching the sun set over the city. Finally, Isaiah spoke. "What happens to Derek now?" "Criminal charges, probably. Civil suits from the other victims. His company will likely collapse. Or at least he'll be forced out. His reputation is destroyed." Elena's voice was matter-of-fact, without triumph or pity. "He'll probably land somewhere eventually. People like him usually do. But he won't have the power to hurt people the same way again." "Good." "Is it?" Elena asked. "I'm not defending him, but is destroying someone really good? Even someone who tried to destroy you first?" Isaiah thought about that. Thought about Derek's face on the news. Thought about the pattern of victims who'd finally found the courage to speak up. "It's not about destruction," he said finally. "It's about consequences. He hurt people for years because there were never consequences. Now there are. Maybe that's not good, but it's necessary." Elena nodded slowly. "My father would like you. You think like he does. I'm nothing like your father. You're both willing to do hard things because they're right. That's rarer than you think." Inside, through the glass doors, Isaiah could see Graham and his team still working, still planning, still building whatever came next. They'd given him a weapon to fight back with, given him resources and strategy and power he'd never had before. But they'd also given him a choice. He could walk away now, take the victory, and go back to his quiet life. Or he could stay, could be part of something bigger, could use what happened to him to help other people in similar situations. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Amara wants to know if you'll be home for bedtime. She has something to show you." Isaiah checked his watch. It was already past 7. He'd missed dinner, missed homework time, missed the evening routine that usually grounded him. "I need to go," he said to Elena. "My daughter, of course. Go. We'll handle the rest of tonight's coordination. You've done enough for today." Isaiah hesitated at the balcony door. "Elena, thank you. For everything. For not letting this go, for bringing in your father, for fighting for me when you didn't have to." She smiled, and it was genuine. "You fought for me first, remember? I'm just returning the favor." He drove home through evening traffic, his mind racing with everything that had happened in 48 hours. His phone kept buzzing with notifications, friend requests, interview offers, messages from people he hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanting to reconnect. He ignored them all. When he got home, Amara was waiting at the door with a poster board covered in crayon drawings. "Dad, look, we did current events in school and I told everyone about how you're a hero, and Mrs. Patterson said we could make a project, and look." She held up the poster proudly. On it, in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "My dad is brave. He helps people even when it's hard." Isaiah felt something break open in his chest, something that had been held tight since that night at the diner. "It's perfect, baby girl," he managed. "Absolutely perfect. Some of the kids said mean things because of the news, but I told them they were wrong, and the truth would come out and I was right." Her pride was incandescent. "Mrs. Patterson said standing up for what's right runs in our family." Isaiah pulled her into a hug, holding on maybe a bit too tight. Over her shoulder, he could see Mrs. Chen in the kitchen, smiling at them both. That night, after Amara was asleep and Mrs. Chen had gone home, Isaiah sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and finally let himself feel the weight of everything that had happened. The fear, the anger, the helplessness, and now the strange, tentative hope that maybe things would actually be okay. His laptop was still open to the news coverage. Derek's world was still imploding in real time. The comments on the full video were running 10-1 in Isaiah's favor now. Several veterans advocacy groups had released statements supporting him. The district attorney had scheduled a press conference for tomorrow to announce the charges against Derek. Isaiah closed the laptop. He'd seen enough. Tomorrow he'd go back to Dawson Technologies and continue building the safety initiative. Tomorrow he'd start the process of clearing his name completely. Tomorrow he'd begin the interviews and the long work of making sure that when people searched for his name, they found the truth. But tonight, he was just a father in a small apartment, grateful that his daughter could sleep peacefully, grateful that the brick through his window would be the worst of it, grateful that sometimes, just sometimes, standing up for what was right didn't cost you everything. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from Graham Dawson, sent at 11:47 p.m. Tomorrow, 9 a.m., we announce the initiative. You're the keynote speaker. Keep it simple. Keep it honest. Tell them why you did what you did. The rest will follow. Isaiah typed back, I'll be there. He set the phone down and walked to Amara's room one more time, checking on her the way he did every night. She was sprawled across her bed, the poster about him being brave propped against her nightstand where she could see it when she woke up. Isaiah thought about all the things he'd tell her someday, when she was old enough to understand, about how doing the right thing was complicated, about how the world wasn't always fair, about how sometimes you had to fight for justice, and sometimes justice found you first. But for now, she could believe the simple truth on her poster. Her dad was brave. He helped people even when it was hard. And tomorrow, he'd keep doing exactly that. The auditorium at Dawson Technologies held 300 people, and every seat was filled by 8:45 a.m. Isaiah stood backstage, his palms sweating despite the cool air conditioning, watching through a gap in the curtain as reporters set up cameras and employees filed in with coffee cups and curious expressions. You're going to be fine, Elena said beside him, though she looked almost as nervous as he felt. Just tell them what happened. Tell them why it mattered. I've never spoken in front of more than 20 people, Isaiah said. And that was giving a safety briefing to my unit. This is different. It's exactly the same. You're telling people how to stay safe and why it matters. The only difference is the audience size. Graham appeared then, immaculate in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Isaiah's truck. 5 minutes. The district attorney just arrived. She's sitting front row with the police chief. That's deliberate. They want to be seen supporting this. Isaiah's stomach churned. No pressure then. Pressure is good. It means people are paying attention. Graham's expression softened slightly. Isaiah, I've given hundreds of speeches to thousands of people. I've addressed shareholders, politicians, industry leaders. Do you know what I've learned? What? The best speeches aren't the polished ones. They're the ones where someone tells the truth about something that matters to them. You have a truth that matters. Just share it. Catherine appeared with a microphone, clipping it to Isaiah's collar with practiced efficiency. Remember, keep your answers concise. If you don't know something, say so. If a question makes you uncomfortable, redirect to the core message. You're here to talk about workplace safety and intervention, not to relitigate the incident. What if someone asks about Derek? Let me handle Derek questions, Graham said. You focus on the positive message. We're here to announce a new initiative, not to bury an enemy. Though they were absolutely burying an enemy, Isaiah thought. The morning news had been brutal for Derek Vaughn. 3 more former employees had come forward with harassment claims overnight. Vaughn Capital's investors were fleeing. 2 senators who'd previously endorsed Derek had released statements distancing themselves from him. The man was being systematically destroyed, and Graham Dawson's fingerprints were all over it. But that wasn't Isaiah's role in this. His role was to be the face of something better, something hopeful. The man who'd done the right thing and somehow come out the other side. It's time, Elena said, touching his arm gently. You've got this. Isaiah walked onto the stage to scattered applause that built as he crossed to the podium. The lights were blinding, making the audience a blur of shapes and faces. He found the teleprompter Catherine had set up, saw his prepared remarks scrolling there, and realized he couldn't do this from a script. Graham was introducing him, talking about courage and integrity and the foundation of a just workplace. The words were eloquent and professional, but they felt distant from what had actually happened in that diner. Then Graham was gesturing to him, and Isaiah was stepping up to the microphone, and 300 pairs of eyes were focused on him with an intensity that made his Marine training feel inadequate. "Thank you, Mr. Dawson," Isaiah began, his voice steadier than he expected. "I'm not good at speeches, so I'm going to skip the prepared remarks and just tell you what happened and why it matters." He saw Catherine tense in the front row, but Graham nodded almost imperceptibly. 3 nights ago, I was sitting in a diner having coffee before my overnight shift. I was tired. I had a long night ahead. All I wanted was 15 minutes of quiet. Then I watched a man grab a waitress by the wrist hard enough to hurt her, and I had a choice to make. The room was completely silent now. I could stay in my booth, mind my own business, let someone else handle it. That would have been the safe choice, the smart choice. I had 3 jobs, a daughter depending on me, and no margin for error. Getting involved in someone else's problem was the last thing I needed. Isaiah paused, remembering that moment, the calculation that had run through his mind in the seconds before he stood up. But I looked around that diner, and nobody else was moving. The cook turned up the radio. The other customers found their coffee fascinating. And this young woman was scared, and nobody was helping her. So I stood up. Not because I'm brave or special, but because I was trained to recognize when a situation is wrong, and I had the ability to intervene safely. He told them about the warnings he'd given Derek, about the associate who'd grabbed him first, about trying to de-escalate while protecting someone who needed protection. He told them about the edited video, the job losses, the brick through his window, his daughter being excluded from playdates. "I'm not telling you this for sympathy," Isaiah said. "I'm telling you because that's what happens when you stand up. There are consequences, sometimes severe ones, and that's exactly why most people don't do it, because the cost of intervention can be devastating, and we've built a society where looking away is rewarded and standing up is punished." He could see people in the audience nodding now, leaning forward. The workplace safety initiative Mr. Dawson is launching today isn't about teaching people to be heroes. It's about teaching them to recognize situations that are wrong, to understand when and how to intervene, and to know that intervention doesn't always mean confrontation. Sometimes it's calling security, sometimes it's creating a distraction, sometimes it's just being a witness who refuses to look away. Isaiah glanced at his notes, then pushed them aside completely. But here's the real problem we need to solve. Right now, the person who intervenes takes all the risk. They risk their job, their safety, their reputation. Meanwhile, the person causing harm often has protection, money, connections, power. We need to flip that equation. We need workplaces where the person who speaks up is protected, and the person causing harm faces consequences. That's what this initiative is about. He talked for another 10 minutes about the training program, about bystander intervention techniques, about creating cultures where harassment couldn't thrive in silence. The words came easier now, flowing from conviction rather than script. When he finished, the applause was genuine and sustained. The district attorney stood first, and others followed. Isaiah stepped back from the podium, slightly stunned, and Graham was there with an approving nod. "That was perfect," he said quietly. "Authentic, compelling, exactly what we needed." The press conference that followed was more challenging. Reporters peppered Isaiah with questions about Derek, about the lawsuit, about his military service, and whether he had PTSD. Catherine had to intervene twice to redirect, and Graham fielded several questions himself with the smooth deflection of someone who'd spent decades managing media. But one question got through that Catherine couldn't block. A reporter from a tabloid website stood up and asked, "Mr. Brooks, some people are saying you're only being celebrated because of your connection to the Dawson family. That if you were just a regular person without powerful friends, you'd still be facing charges and unemployment. How do you respond to that?" The room went silent. Isaiah saw Elena's expression tighten, saw Graham's jaw clench. This was the trap. The question designed to make him look either ungrateful or privileged. Isaiah leaned into the microphone. "Those people are absolutely right." The reporter blinked, clearly not expecting agreement. "If I didn't have the Dawson family's resources, I'd probably be facing criminal charges right now. The lawsuit would have bankrupted me. The edited video would have defined me forever. That's not because I'm special or deserving. It's because the system is designed to protect people with money and connections, and I'm only surviving this because someone with money and connections decided to help me." He could feel the energy in the room shifting, but he pressed on. That's exactly the problem we're trying to fix. Justice shouldn't depend on whether you happen to know a billionaire. Doing the right thing shouldn't require having powerful friends. But right now, that's how it works. Most people in my situation don't get a second chance. They get destroyed and the people who hurt them walk away. That's what we're trying to change with this initiative. The reporter sat down, looking somewhat chastened. Graham stepped back to the microphone. Which is why Dawson Technologies is committing $50 million over the next 5 years to developing and implementing workplace safety programs, not just in our own company, but across industries. We're going to make the resources we use to help Isaiah available to other workers who find themselves in similar situations. Because Mr. Brooks is right, justice shouldn't require a wealthy patron. The announcement made headlines. By noon, 3 other major corporations had pledged to adopt similar programs. By evening, the governor had called for statewide workplace safety reform. The story had shifted completely from Derek Vaughn's victimhood narrative to a broader conversation about harassment, intervention, and accountability. But while the public victory was unfolding, something darker was happening behind the scenes. Isaiah was in a meeting with Marcus and the training team when Elena burst in, her face pale. "We have a problem. Derek just posted something." She pulled up her phone, and Isaiah felt his blood run cold. Derek had posted a series of photos on social media, pictures of Amara at school, at the playground, walking with Mrs. Chen. The caption read, "Interesting how quickly people forget that actions have consequences, how quickly they forget that everyone has vulnerabilities." "He's threatening my daughter," Isaiah said, his voice deadly quiet. "He's threatening an 8-year-old child." Graham was already on his phone, speaking rapidly to someone. "I want security at that school immediately. I want someone on Mrs. Chen's building, and I want our legal team to file for a restraining order within the hour." Elena was typing furiously. "I'm contacting the police, the school administration, and our PR team. This crosses every line. This ends him completely." Marcus put a hand on Isaiah's shoulder. "My team is already moving. Your daughter will be safe. But I need you to stay here and let us handle this. If you go after Derek now, you give him exactly what he wants, a narrative where you're the aggressor." Isaiah wanted to argue, wanted to drive straight to Amara's school and pull her out, wanted to find Derek Vaughn and make him understand what happened to people who threaten children. But the training kicked in, the discipline that separated reactive violence from strategic action. "I want to see her," he said tightly. "I need to know she's okay." "I'll have security bring her here," Graham said. "Discreetly, with a full detail. She'll be safe." The next 2 hours were the longest of Isaiah's life. He paced the conference room while Graham's lawyers filed emergency motions and Elena coordinated with law enforcement. The photos Derek had posted were being analyzed for metadata, for location information, for anything that could prove he'd been surveilling Amara. When security finally brought her to Dawson Technologies, escorted by 2 professional bodyguards who looked like they could stop a tank, Isaiah nearly collapsed with relief. Amara seemed more excited than scared, her eyes wide at the fancy building and the serious-looking people. "Dad, why are these people here? Am I in trouble?" Isaiah pulled her close. "No, baby, you're not in trouble, but some bad people are being mean, so these nice folks are going to make sure you stay safe for a little while." "Like bodyguards?" Her eyes went even wider. "Like in the movies?" "Exactly like in the movies." Elena knelt down to Amara's level. "Hi, I'm Elena. Your dad helped me when I was in trouble. Now I'm going to help make sure you stay safe. Is that okay?" Amara studied her seriously. "Are you a princess?" "You look like a princess." Elena laughed, surprised. "Not a princess. Just someone who's very grateful to your dad." While Amara was distracted by the floor-to-ceiling windows and the view of the city, Graham pulled Isaiah aside. "Derek just made the biggest mistake of his life," he said quietly. "Threatening you was one thing. Threatening a child is something else entirely. The police are treating this as criminal harassment and possible stalking. The photos prove he's been watching your daughter, which violates a dozen laws, and the public response is going to be nuclear." Indeed, the backlash was already building. Derek's post had been screenshot and shared thousands of times, and the response was universal condemnation. Even people who'd defended him earlier were now calling for his arrest. Threatening a child had crossed a line that even his most ardent supporters couldn't justify. By evening, police had arrested Derek Vaughn on charges of harassment, stalking, and making terroristic threats. His mugshot, looking nothing like the polished businessman from his website, was broadcast on every news channel. Vaughn Capital Management announced his immediate termination. His father released a statement expressing deep disappointment and complete disavowal of his son's actions. Derek Vaughn's destruction was total and absolute, accomplished in less than 72 hours from his initial press conference. But Isaiah felt no triumph, only a deep exhaustion and lingering fear. He sat in Graham's office after Amara had fallen asleep on the leather couch, her head pillowed on her backpack, and tried to process everything that had happened. "Is it over?" he asked quietly. "The immediate threat is over," Graham replied. "Derek is in custody. The restraining order is in place. But you should know, we found evidence that he'd been planning something worse. His computer had search histories about your address, your daughter's school schedule, your daily routines. If we hadn't moved when we did—" "Don't," Isaiah cut him off. "I can't think about what might have happened." Elena entered with 3 cups of coffee, setting them down with the gentle care of someone trying not to wake the sleeping child. "The DA called," she said. "They're charging Derek with everything they can make stick. With the photos, the search history, and the pattern of behavior we documented, they think he'll get serious prison time." "Good," Isaiah said, and meant it. Whatever complicated feelings he'd had about Derek's destruction had evaporated the moment his daughter's safety was threatened. Graham leaned back in his chair, looking older than he had that morning. "I owe you an apology, Isaiah. I underestimated how far Derek would go. I thought he'd fight dirty, but I didn't think he'd target a child. My security should have been in place from the beginning." "You couldn't have known." "I should have known. Men like Derek, when they're cornered, when they're losing everything, they become desperate. And desperate men are dangerous." Graham looked at Amara sleeping peacefully. "I'm going to assign a security detail to you and your daughter, full-time, for as long as necessary. I can't afford— It's not a bill. It's my responsibility. You got involved in this because my daughter was working in that diner. Everything that happened after is partially my fault for not protecting you better." Isaiah wanted to argue, but he looked at Amara and realized his pride wasn't worth her safety. "Okay, thank you." Over the next week, the story continued to evolve. Derek Vaughn's preliminary hearing revealed even more disturbing evidence. Detailed plans about confronting Isaiah, notes about teaching lessons, and making examples. The judge denied bail, citing clear danger to the public. The 3 women who'd previously settled harassment cases with Derek came forward publicly, giving detailed interviews about his pattern of behavior. Their courage inspired others, and within days, 7 more victims had contacted the district attorney's office. Meanwhile, the Workplace Safety Initiative gained momentum. 20 major corporations signed on to implement the training program. 3 universities requested permission to develop case studies. The governor announced a task force on workplace harassment with Isaiah as an advisor. But the most meaningful change happened quietly, in small ways Isaiah almost didn't notice. Parents started letting their children play with Amara again, some with sheepish apologies. His neighbors organized a community watch to help him feel safer. The school administration assigned extra security and made it clear that Amara was welcome and protected. One afternoon, Isaiah was working in his new office at Dawson Technologies when Marcus knocked on the door. "Got a minute? There's someone who wants to meet you." Isaiah followed him to a conference room where a young woman waited, maybe 25, with nervous hands and determined eyes. "Mr. Brooks, this is Jennifer Caldwell. She works in our accounting department." Jennifer stood, shaking Isaiah's hand with a grip that trembled slightly. "I saw your speech about intervention and speaking up, and I realized I've been watching something happen in my department for months and not saying anything because I was scared." "What's happening?" Isaiah asked gently. "My supervisor. He makes comments to the women in the office. Nothing overtly sexual, just subtle things that make us uncomfortable. He stands too close. He touches shoulders when he doesn't need to. He makes jokes about our appearance. It's all deniable, you know? If you complain, you sound oversensitive. But it's constant, and it makes work miserable." Isaiah looked at Marcus, who nodded. This was exactly what the initiative was designed to address. The subtle harassment that happened in the shadows because victims feared they wouldn't be believed. "Tell me everything," Isaiah said. "Names, dates, specific incidents, and I promise you, this time someone will believe you." By the end of the day, Jennifer's supervisor had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. 2 other women in the department came forward with similar stories. Within a week, the man was terminated, and the accounting department implemented new training and oversight protocols. It was a small victory in the scheme of things, but it mattered. One person found the courage to speak up because she'd seen someone else stand up and survive. That was how culture changed, Isaiah realized. Not with grand gestures, but with individual moments of courage that inspired others. 3 weeks after the diner incident, Isaiah sat in a courtroom for Derek Vaughn's arraignment. He didn't have to be there, but Elena had asked him to come, and he felt like he needed to see this chapter close properly. Derek looked diminished in his orange jumpsuit, his expensive haircut growing out, his confident bearing replaced by something hunched and defeated. When their eyes met across the courtroom, there was no anger in Derek's expression, just a kind of hollow bewilderment, as if he still couldn't quite understand how his world had collapsed so completely. The judge read the charges: assault, harassment, stalking, making terroristic threats, witness intimidation. Derek's lawyer entered a plea of not guilty, but everyone in the courtroom knew it was theater. The evidence was overwhelming. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, but Isaiah had learned to navigate them now. He gave a brief statement about believing in the justice system and hoping this would send a message that harassment wouldn't be tolerated, then let Elena and Graham handle the detailed questions. As they walked to the car, Elena said quietly, "Do you feel closure?" Isaiah thought about it. "No, I don't think I ever will. Not completely. What happened in that diner changed my life in ways I'm still figuring out. But I feel like maybe something good came from it. Like maybe other people won't have to go through what I went through. That's what my father thinks too. He told me last night that you reminded him why he started his company in the first place. Not to make money, but to build something that mattered. He'd lost sight of that somewhere along the way. He seems like a good man. Complicated, but good." "He is, and he thinks you're extraordinary. He wants to offer you a permanent position, not just with the safety initiative, but in the company leadership. Director of Workplace Culture and Safety. Real power to make real changes." Isaiah stopped walking. "Elena, I'm a guy who was working 3 jobs a month ago. I don't have business experience or corporate training or you have something better. You have integrity and perspective and the ability to see what's wrong and fix it. That's rarer than an MBA." He looked at her, this woman who could have stayed silent in that diner, who could have accepted Derek's harassment as the price of her social experiment, who instead had fought back and dragged Isaiah into a war that had nearly destroyed him and ultimately saved them both. "I'll think about it," he said. That night, Isaiah made Amara's favorite dinner. Mac and cheese with cut-up hot dogs, the meal that never failed to make her smile. She chattered about her day, about the book she was reading, about the science project she was planning. Her security detail waited discreetly outside, barely visible but always present. After she was in bed, Isaiah sat at his kitchen table with the job offer Graham had sent over. Director of Workplace Culture and Safety, salary that would change his life, benefits that would secure Amar's future, the opportunity to turn his worst experience into something meaningful. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "The girl is wondering if you're going to take the fancy job. She heard Elena talking about it. She wants to know if you'll still have time to help her with homework." Isaiah smiled and typed back, "Always. No job is more important than that." But he knew he was going to take it, not because of the money or the title or the opportunity, but because Jennifer Caldwell and people like her deserved someone who understood what it meant to stand up when it was hard, someone who knew the cost of intervention and believed it was worth paying anyway. He pulled out his phone and called Graham directly. "I accept," he said when the older man answered. "The position, the responsibility, all of it, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I want real authority to make changes, not just a symbolic role. I want direct access to you when I identify problems. And I want protection for anyone who comes forward through this program. Real protection, the kind you gave me." "Done. Anything else?" Isaiah looked at Amara's poster still propped against the wall, the one declaring him brave in crayon letters. Yeah, I want to create a fund for people who intervene and face retaliation. Legal support, income replacement, whatever they need to survive the consequences of doing the right thing. Because most people don't have a Graham Dawson in their corner when things go wrong. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Graham said, "I'll seed it with 10 million. We'll call it the Intervention Support Fund. Your daughter's poster gave me the idea for the tagline, for people who help even when it's hard." Isaiah felt something settle in his chest, a sense of purpose that had been missing since he'd left the Marines. He'd spent 8 years surviving, working multiple jobs, keeping his head down, protecting Amara from a world that seemed determined to be harsh and unfair. But maybe there was another way. Maybe instead of just surviving the harshness, he could help change it. One intervention at a time, one protected whistleblower at a time. One person finding courage because they knew someone would have their back. "When do I start?" Isaiah asked. "Officially, Monday. But between you and me? You started the moment you stood up in that diner. Everything since then has just been making it official." After the call ended, Isaiah stood in his small apartment and looked around at the life he'd built through sheer determination and sacrifice. It wasn't much by conventional standards, but it was his, earned through every difficult choice and long night. Tomorrow, that life would start expanding into something bigger. But tonight, it was still just him and Amara and Mrs. Chen next door, and the simple rhythms of survival that had carried them this far. He checked on his daughter one more time, found her sleeping with her favorite planet book clutched to her chest, and allowed himself to believe that maybe the universe was slightly more just than he'd given it credit for. Not because good always triumphed, but because sometimes, when you stood up for what was right, you found allies willing to stand with you. And that made all the difference. 6 months later, Isaiah stood in the main ballroom of the Riverside Convention Center, watching 1,200 people file in for the first annual Workplace Safety Summit. The event had grown far beyond anything he'd imagined when Graham first proposed it. Representatives from 70 companies, advocacy groups from 8 states, 3 members of Congress, and media coverage from national outlets. His new office at Dawson Technologies had floor-to-ceiling windows on the 26th floor, a view he still wasn't quite used to. But the real change wasn't the office, or the salary, or even the title printed on his business cards. It was the weight of responsibility he carried now. The knowledge that people were counting on him to transform one moment of intervention into systemic change. "You look nervous," Elena said, appearing beside him with 2 bottles of water. She'd cut her hair shorter since the diner incident, and she carried herself differently now, less like someone playing a role, more like someone who'd found her purpose. "Don't be. You've given this presentation 40 times. To groups of 50 people, not 1,200, and never with C-level executives from Fortune 500 companies watching. They're here because of you, because you proved that intervention works, and that companies have a responsibility to protect people who speak up. Just tell them what you've been telling everyone else." The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of transformation. The Workplace Safety Initiative had launched with immediate success, 37 companies implementing the training in the first quarter alone. The Intervention Support Fund had helped 16 people who'd faced retaliation for reporting harassment or intervening in dangerous situations. And Isaiah had become, somewhat reluctantly, the public face of a movement. But the real work happened in quieter moments, like the afternoon he'd spent with Maria Santos, a warehouse worker who'd reported sexual harassment and been fired the next day. The fund had covered her legal fees and living expenses while she fought for reinstatement. 2 weeks ago, she'd won her case, been awarded back pay and damages, and her supervisor had been terminated. Or the evening he talked with James Morrison, a junior accountant who'd witnessed financial fraud and feared destroying his career by reporting it. The fund's lawyers had helped him file a protected disclosure, and the fraud investigation had uncovered millions in embezzlement. James had been promoted, not punished. These were the victories that mattered. The individual lives changed because someone had decided that doing the right thing shouldn't cost you everything. 5 minutes. Marcus said, appearing in his crisp security detail suit. He'd become more than just Graham's head of security. He was Isaiah's mentor in navigating corporate politics and strategic planning. "The live stream has 40,000 viewers already. This is big, Isaiah." Isaiah took a deep breath and thought about that night at the Moonlight Diner, about the split-second decision that had led to all of this. Sometimes he still wondered what would have happened if he'd stayed in his booth, minded his own business, let someone else handle it. His life would certainly be simpler, quieter, smaller. But then he thought about Jennifer Caldwell, who'd found the courage to report her supervisor because she'd seen Isaiah's speech, or Marcus Chen's niece, who'd intervened when a classmate was being bullied because her uncle had told her about a man who stood up in a diner, or the dozens of training sessions where people had shared stories about times they'd looked away and regretted it, times they'd spoken up and survived, times they'd been waiting for permission to care. The lights in the ballroom dimmed, and Graham took the stage to introduce him. The billionaire had aged slightly over the past months, the stress of expanding the initiative and managing Derek's legal aftermath showing in new lines around his eyes. But there was also something lighter in his bearing, as if he'd rediscovered some purpose he'd lost years ago. 6 months ago, Graham began, his voice carrying across the massive room, my daughter was assaulted while working as a waitress. She was grabbed, threatened, and humiliated by a man who believed his wealth and connections made him untouchable. Everyone in that diner saw what happened, but only one person stood up. Not because he was required to, not because it was his job, but because he recognized injustice and had the courage to intervene. Isaiah watched from the wings as Graham told the story, seeing it through his perspective for the first time. The father who'd received a panicked call in the middle of the night, the rage at realizing his daughter had been in danger, the determination to ensure the man who'd helped her wouldn't be destroyed for his courage. Isaiah Brooks lost 3 jobs in 24 hours for doing the right thing, Graham continued. He faced a $500,000 lawsuit, criminal charges, and a coordinated campaign to destroy his reputation. He had his home vandalized and his child threatened, all because he couldn't look away from someone who needed help. The room was completely silent now, 1,200 people focused on Graham's words. But here's what Derek Vaughn didn't understand. Here's what every person who's ever used power to silence others fails to grasp. Courage is contagious. When one person stands up, it gives others permission to do the same. Isaiah's intervention that night started a chain reaction that exposed a pattern of abuse spanning years and gave 7 other victims the courage to come forward. His willingness to face consequences rather than compromise his principles inspired our entire company to examine how we handle workplace safety. Graham gestured toward the wings. Isaiah Brooks is now our Director of Workplace Culture and Safety. The program he's built has been implemented in 70 companies employing over 200,000 people. The Intervention Support Fund has helped 43 individuals who faced retaliation for speaking up. But numbers don't capture the real impact. That impact is in the thousands of small moments where someone chose to intervene because they knew they wouldn't face it alone. Ladies and gentlemen, Isaiah Brooks. The applause was immediate and sustained. Isaiah walked onto the stage, shook Graham's hand, and stood behind the podium looking out at an audience that represented the power to change millions of lives. Thank you, Mr. Dawson, Isaiah began, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. But I need to correct something he said. I'm not courageous. I'm just someone who couldn't live with myself if I'd stayed silent. He clicked to the first slide of his presentation. The surveillance footage from the diner, the full unedited version showing Derek grabbing Elena and Isaiah's calm intervention. This is what intervention looks like in real time. I gave 3 warnings. I stayed calm. I didn't escalate. And when Derek's associate grabbed me, I used the minimum force necessary to protect myself. This wasn't heroism. It was training and recognition that the situation was wrong. Isaiah walked through the presentation he'd refined over dozens of sessions, breaking down the elements of effective intervention. How to assess risk. How to de-escalate. When to call for help instead of acting directly. How to be a witness when direct intervention isn't safe. But halfway through, he stopped following the slides and spoke from the heart. Here's what I've learned in 6 months of doing this work. Most people want to help. They see injustice and it bothers them. But they're terrified of the consequences, and they should be. Because right now, in most workplaces, the person who speaks up faces more punishment than the person who caused the problem. He pulled up a new slide, one not in the original presentation. It showed statistics, the percentage of whistleblowers who lost their jobs, the average cost of defending against retaliation lawsuits, the timeline for justice that stretched into years. This is why people don't intervene, not because they don't care, but because the system is designed to punish them for caring. And that's what we're here to change. Isaiah looked directly at the camera streaming to 40,000 viewers. I'm talking to the executives in this room and watching online. You have the power to flip this equation. You can create policies that protect people who report problems. You can establish funds that cover legal fees for whistleblowers. You can promote people who have the courage to identify issues instead of quietly managing them. You can make intervention the rewarded behavior and harassment the career-ending choice. He clicked to another slide, this one showing the logos of companies that had implemented comprehensive protection programs. These organizations have reduced harassment complaints by an average of 43%. Not because there's less harassment, but because it's being addressed early, before it escalates. Their retention rates for women and minorities have increased, their legal costs have dropped, and employee satisfaction scores have risen across the board. Doing the right thing isn't just ethical, it's profitable. Isaiah spent the next 20 minutes detailing implementation strategies, sharing case studies, and answering questions from the audience. A CEO from a tech company asked about managing false reports. A union representative wanted to know how to protect hourly workers who feared retaliation. A lawyer questioned the legal implications of intervention policies. Isaiah answered each question with the practical knowledge he'd gained from months of implementation. But he always brought it back to the core principle. People should be protected for doing the right thing, not punished for it. When the presentation ended, the applause was thunderous. But what mattered more were the conversations that followed. Executives from companies that hadn't yet signed on approached him with questions about implementation. Advocacy groups wanted to partner on training. 3 different people shared stories about times they'd intervened or wished they had, their voices thick with emotion. A woman in her 40s waited until the crowd thinned before approaching. She was well-dressed, professional, with the bearing of someone used to boardrooms. Mr. Brooks, I'm Sandra Pierce. I'm the CEO of Pierce Manufacturing. We employ 8,000 people across 12 states. She paused, her composure cracking slightly. 20 years ago, I was a junior engineer and I reported my supervisor for harassment. I was fired within a week. It took me 3 years to find another job in my field. I rebuilt my career, but I never forgot what it cost to speak up. I'm sorry that happened to you, Isaiah said. Don't be sorry. Be successful. Sandra's eyes were fierce. I want to implement your program in every one of my facilities. I want to fund 10 spots in your intervention support fund. And I want to tell my story publicly so other survivors know they're not alone. Can you help me do that? Absolutely. Over the next hour, Isaiah collected commitments from 9 new companies, partnerships with 4 advocacy organizations, and speaking invitations from 3 universities. But the conversation that mattered most came from an unexpected source. Derek Vaughn's father, Richard Vaughn, waited near the back of the ballroom, looking older than his 68 years. He approached Isaiah with the careful movements of someone expecting to be rejected. Mr. Brooks, I don't expect you to speak with me, but I wanted to try. Isaiah studied the man who'd raised Derek, who'd built Vaughn Capital Management into a powerhouse, who'd publicly disavowed his son, but never quite explained how that son had become who he was. I'm listening, Isaiah said neutrally. My son is in prison because of his choices. I accept that, but I'm also responsible for those choices in ways I'm still coming to understand. Richard's voice was quiet, stripped of the authority that usually accompanied wealth. I taught him that power meant never backing down, that winning was everything, that people were either useful or obstacles. I thought I was preparing him for business. Instead, I created someone who hurt people without conscience. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to fund a scholarship program in your daughter's name. Full ride to any university for children of whistleblowers and intervention survivors. I can't undo what Derek did, but I can try to create something better from the wreckage. Isaiah thought about refusing, about telling Richard Vaughn that his money couldn't buy redemption. But then he thought about Amara and all the other children who'd suffered because their parents had chosen courage over safety. Not in my daughter's name, Isaiah said finally. In the name of everyone who stood up and paid the price. The Sarah Brooks Memorial Scholarship Fund, after my late wife. She was a nurse who spent her life helping people. This would honor her. Richard's eyes glistened. That would be appropriate, thank you. After he left, Elena appeared with her usual impeccable timing. "That was generous of you," she said. "Most people would have sent him away." "Most people probably should have, but anger doesn't build anything. It just burns." Isaiah looked around the ballroom at the people still networking and planning and committing to change. Besides, if we're serious about this work, we need to accept help from everyone willing to give it, even people with complicated motivations. Spoken like someone who's learned to navigate this world. Elena smiled. "My father was right about you. You're a natural at this. I'm a guy who stood up in a diner 6 months ago. Everything else is just trying to make that moment matter." "It already mattered. You saved my life." "And you saved mine. We're even." Elena laughed. "We're not even close to even, but we're building something good together. That counts for more." The summit continued for 2 more days, workshops and panels and strategy sessions that left Isaiah exhausted and energized in equal measure. On the final evening, Graham hosted a private dinner for the core team: Isaiah, Elena, Marcus, Catherine, and the key staff who'd built the initiative from concept to reality. "I want to propose a toast," Graham said, raising his glass. 6 months ago, I would have told you this project was impossible. Corporate culture doesn't change that fast. People don't commit resources to programs without proven ROI, and a single incident in a diner certainly doesn't spark a national movement." He looked at Isaiah. "But I would have been wrong, because I would have been measuring with the wrong metrics. I would have been thinking about quarterly returns and market position instead of about the Maria Santoses and James Morrisons whose lives we've changed. I would have missed what actually matters." Graham's expression was more open than Isaiah had ever seen it. "My daughter told me something recently. She said that before the diner incident, I was building a fortune, but I'd forgotten what it was for. That I'd become so focused on winning that I'd stopped asking whether what I was winning mattered. She was right. Isaiah, you didn't just help Elena that night. You reminded me why I started this company 30 years ago, to build something that made the world better, not just richer." The table was quiet, everyone recognizing the weight of Graham's words. "So here's to the next 6 months," Graham continued, "to expanding this program to every state, to changing laws that punish whistleblowers, to building a culture where intervention is celebrated and harassment has real consequences, and to all of you who've made this possible." They raised their glasses, and Isaiah felt the moment settle over him. This was real. This mattered. This was changing lives in measurable, meaningful ways. After dinner, Isaiah drove home to the new apartment he'd moved into 3 months ago. 2 bedrooms, safe neighborhood, close to Amara's school. The security detail had been scaled back to daytime coverage only, enough to provide protection without making them feel like prisoners. Amara was at Mrs. Chen's, having dinner and probably negotiating to stay up past her bedtime. Isaiah had an hour before he needed to pick her up, an hour of quiet in a life that had become significantly less quiet since that night at the diner. He opened his laptop and found an email waiting from the district attorney's office. Derek Vaughn had accepted a plea deal, 8 years in prison for assault, harassment, stalking, and witness intimidation. It was over. Truly, finally over. Isaiah should have felt relief, vindication, closure. Instead, he felt a strange emptiness, as if he'd been carrying something heavy for so long that its absence left him unbalanced. His phone rang. Elena. "Did you see the DA's email?" she asked. "Just read it. 8 years. He'll be 43 when he gets out. His company is dissolved. His reputation is destroyed. Everything he built is gone." "Good," Isaiah said, but the word felt hollow. "Is it? I keep thinking about what his father said, about how Derek became who he was because of how he was raised, what he was taught to value. Does that make what happened to him justice or just tragedy?" Isaiah thought about the man who'd grabbed Elena with such casual entitlement, who'd orchestrated a campaign to destroy someone who'd stood up to him, who'd threatened a child to prove a point. "Maybe it's both," he said finally. "Maybe it's tragedy that he became someone who hurt people, and justice that he's being held accountable for it. The two things can be true at the same time." "When did you become so philosophical?" "When I started spending time with billionaires and their daughters. You people overthink everything." Elena laughed. "We're having a small celebration tomorrow night. Nothing fancy, just the team. Will you come? Bring Amara. My father wants to meet her properly. She'll try to convince him to fund a mission to Mars. He'll probably do it. He likes ambitious thinkers. After they hung up, Isaiah sat in the quiet apartment and let himself feel everything he'd been too busy to process over the past 6 months. The fear of that first week when Derek's campaign had threatened everything. The exhaustion of learning a completely new world while trying to be present for Amara. The weight of responsibility as more people came forward, trusting him to protect them. The satisfaction of small victories and the frustration of systemic resistance. But underneath it all was something he hadn't felt in 8 years. Not since Sarah died and left him drowning in grief and medical bills and single parenthood. It was hope. Not the desperate, clinging hope of survival, but the genuine belief that tomorrow might be better than today, because people were working to make it so. The next evening, Isaiah and Amara arrived at Elena's apartment, a penthouse in the financial district with views that made Amara gasp and immediately start naming constellations visible in the darkening sky. "That's Orion," she announced to Graham, who'd knelt down to her eye level with the careful attention of someone unused to children but willing to try. "And that's the Big Dipper, which isn't actually a constellation. It's an asterism. Do you know what an asterism is?" "I don't," Graham admitted. "Would you teach me?" Isaiah watched his daughter explain astronomy to a billionaire with the absolute confidence of an 8-year-old who'd read every library book on the subject, and something in his chest loosened. This was what he'd fought for. Not the job or the initiative or even the justice. This. The ability for Amara to grow up in a world where her father's courage had been rewarded instead of punished, where she could learn that standing up for what's right didn't mean losing everything. Elena appeared beside him with wine for him and juice for Amara. "She's already charmed my father completely," Elena observed. "He's going to fund some ridiculous space project by the end of the evening." "Probably. She's very persuasive." Like her father. They stood together watching the celebration, Marcus arguing good-naturedly with Catherine about publicity strategies, David showing off photos from the summit, Graham listening with complete focus as Amara explained the difference between a planet and a dwarf planet. "Can I ask you something?" Isaiah said. "Why were you working at that diner? You never fully explained." Elena was quiet for a moment, choosing her words. "My father built his empire from nothing. He worked construction jobs, put himself through community college, borrowed money from everyone who'd lend it. He knows what it's like to struggle. But I grew up with everything. Private schools, trust funds, opportunities handed to me because of his name. I wanted to understand what his life had been like, what it felt like to work for hourly wages, to serve people who sometimes treated you as less than human, to be invisible. And I learned that my father's stories didn't capture how hard it really is, how exhausting, how people make impossible choices between paying rent and buying groceries, how one missed shift can spiral into eviction. I was going to write about it, try to help people understand, but then Derek showed up and reminded me that some people learn those lessons and become more compassionate, while others learn them and decide to climb over everyone else. She looked at Isaiah. "You made a different choice. You saw someone struggling and helped even though it cost you. That's rare. That matters. So do you. You could have let your father's lawyers handle everything quietly. Instead, you fought publicly, put yourself out there, made yourself vulnerable. That takes its own kind of courage." The party stretched into the evening, conversations flowing naturally between professional strategy and personal stories. At one point, Graham pulled Isaiah aside onto the balcony where the city lights stretched to the horizon. "I have a proposition for you," Graham said without preamble. "The initiative is successful beyond projections. We're fielding requests from international companies, from governments, from organizations we never anticipated reaching. It's outgrowing a single division of Dawson Technologies. What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we spin it off into its own nonprofit organization, the Brooks Foundation for Workplace Safety and Intervention. You'd be the executive director with full autonomy. I'd provide initial funding and ongoing support, but the vision and execution would be yours." Isaiah stared at him. "You want me to run a foundation?" "I want you to build a movement. The foundation would develop training programs, fund intervention support, lobby for legislative changes, and create a national network of protected whistleblowers and intervention survivors. It's bigger than one company. It deserves its own identity." I'm not qualified to run a foundation. You're the only person qualified to run this foundation. You understand the stakes viscerally, not academically. You know what it costs to stand up and what it means to be protected when you do. That's not teachable, Isaiah. That's lived experience that makes you uniquely capable. Isaiah looked out at the city, thinking about all the people in those buildings who'd witnessed injustice and stayed silent, who'd wanted to help but feared the consequences, who'd suffered alone because speaking up seemed impossible. If I do this, he said slowly, I need to do it right. Not just training programs and policies, but real systemic change. That means challenging power structures, making enemies, fighting battles that might take years to win. Good. The easy fights are already won. We need people willing to take on the hard ones. I'll need a team, people who understand intervention from different angles, legal, psychological, tactical, cultural. And I'll need funding that doesn't come with strings attached. Done. Whatever you need. Isaiah turned to face Graham directly. Why are you doing this? And don't tell me it's just because I helped Elena. There's something else. Graham was quiet for a long moment, looking older in the dim light. When I was 23, he said finally, I worked construction on a high-rise project. One of the foremen was cutting corners on safety regulations, and I knew it would get someone killed eventually. I reported it to the site supervisor, who told me to mind my own business. 2 weeks later, a scaffold collapsed. 3 men died, including my friend David Chen, Marcus's father. Isaiah felt the weight of that revelation settle between them. I blamed myself for years, Graham continued. Thought I should have pushed harder, reported to authorities, done something more. But I was young and scared, and I let it drop. I built my company partially in David's memory, trying to create workplaces where safety mattered. But I'd forgotten that story somewhere along the way. Let it get buried under profits and market share and competition. He met Isaiah's eyes. You reminded me. When you stood up in that diner, when you faced consequences but didn't back down, you showed me what I should have done 30 years ago. So yes, this is about helping you, but it's also about honoring David Chen and everyone else who died because people like me didn't have the courage to fight harder. They stood in silence, the city breathing around them. 2 men from completely different worlds united by the understanding that courage often comes too late and second chances should never be wasted. I'll do it, Isaiah said. I'll build your foundation. But it's not the Brooks Foundation. It's the Chen Brooks Foundation for Workplace Safety and Intervention. So we remember that this work honors people who came before and protects people who come after. Graham's handshake was firm, sealing a partnership that would shape both their futures. 6 weeks later, Isaiah stood in the conference room of the Chen Brooks Foundation's new headquarters, modest office space in a building Graham owned, donated rent-free for the first 5 years. The walls were still mostly bare, the furniture borrowed from Dawson Technologies' surplus, but it was theirs. His team sat around the table, Marcus as Director of Security Training, Catherine handling communications, Jennifer Caldwell as Director of Victim Services, and 3 other specialists they'd recruited from advocacy organizations and corporate backgrounds. All right, Isaiah began. We've got our first major case. A nurse in Philadelphia reported unsafe staffing levels and patient care violations at her hospital. She was fired 3 days later on pretextual grounds. The hospital is owned by a corporation with deep pockets and aggressive legal teams. They're making an example of her. Jennifer pulled up the case file. Christina Morales, 37, single mother of 2. She'd worked at that hospital for 12 years with exemplary reviews until she filed the safety complaint. Now she's blacklisted in the local healthcare system and facing eviction. What do we have? Isaiah asked. Marcus had already done the research. The hospital has a pattern. 4 other nurses reported similar issues over the past 3 years. All were fired or forced out. The corporation settles quietly and makes people sign NDAs, classic pattern of systematic retaliation. Then we break the pattern, Isaiah said. Jennifer, coordinate with our legal team. I want Christina's job protected and compensation for the retaliatory firing. Marcus, document everything. If there are 4 victims we know about, there are probably 20 we don't. Find them. Catherine, start preparing the media strategy. When we win this, I want it visible enough that other healthcare workers know they can report safety issues. The team moved into action with the efficiency of people who'd found their purpose. This was what the foundation was built for, taking cases too risky or complex for individuals to fight alone and throwing institutional weight behind them. Over the next 3 months, the Cristina Morales case became a template for the foundation's approach. They funded her legal defense while their team investigated the hospital corporation, finding not 4 but 17 nurses who'd reported safety violations and faced retaliation. The corporation tried to fight, tried to intimidate, tried to bury the case in legal procedures, but they were used to fighting individuals who ran out of money and energy. They weren't prepared for an organization with deep funding and public support that turned their retaliation into a national story about patient safety and whistleblower protection. The case settled 4 months later. Cristina got her job back, along with back pay and damages. The hospital corporation agreed to implement new safety reporting protocols and third-party oversight, and 16 other nurses received compensation for the retaliation they'd faced. More importantly, 3 states used the case as justification to strengthen whistleblower protections in healthcare settings. Isaiah watched it unfold from his foundation office, coordinating with lawyers and advocates and media contacts, and realized this was the work he'd been meant to do all along. Not construction or security or even the corporate position at Dawson Technologies, but this, fighting for people who'd chosen courage over safety and paying the price for it. One evening, he was working late when Amara appeared in his office doorway, escorted by the security guard. "Mrs. Chen said I should bring you dinner because you forget to eat when you're working," she announced, holding up a bag from the Thai restaurant down the street. Isaiah smiled and cleared space on his desk. "Mrs. Chen is very wise." They ate together, Amara chattering about her day at school, about the science fair she was planning, about the book she'd just finished. Normal, beautiful, ordinary conversation that grounded him. "Dad," she said suddenly, her expression serious, "do you miss your old jobs, the ones before the diner?" Isaiah thought about it honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity. I knew exactly what I needed to do each day. Show up, work hard, come home to you. Now every day is different and complicated." "But do you miss it?" "No, baby. This work matters more. I help people who are scared and alone like I was. That's worth the complication." Amara nodded, satisfied. "Good. Because you're really good at it. Better than construction." "How do you know?" "Because construction is building things for people. But this is building people back up when they're broken. That's harder and more important." Isaiah looked at his 8-year-old daughter, who somehow understood things that took most adults decades to learn, and felt grateful beyond measure that she was growing up in a world where her father's courage had been rewarded. 6 more months passed in a blur of cases and victories and setbacks. The foundation helped 37 people fight retaliation for intervention or reporting. They won 29 cases completely, partial victories in 6 others, and lost 2 that still stung despite knowing they'd done everything possible. But the real victory was in the culture shift they were creating. More companies adopted protection policies. More states strengthened whistleblower laws. More people found the courage to speak up because they knew support existed. Derek Vaughn's trial had faded from headlines, but the conversation his case started continued to evolve and expand. One afternoon, Isaiah received an unexpected visitor. Sandra Pierce, the CEO who'd shared her story at the summit, arrived with a proposal. "I want to create a corporate partnership program," she said, spreading out detailed plans across his desk. "Companies pay an annual fee to be certified partners. In exchange, they get access to your training programs, and their employees get automatic access to the Intervention Support Fund if they face retaliation. It creates a sustainable funding model and incentivizes companies to implement real protections." Isaiah studied the proposal, seeing immediately how it could transform the foundation's reach. "This could work," he said, "but we'd need ironclad standards. Companies can't just pay for certification. They'd have to prove meaningful policy changes and track outcomes." "Agreed. I'm proposing a third-party audit system. Companies that don't maintain standards lose certification and face public disclosure. It has to mean something, not just be a PR stunt." They spent the next 3 hours refining the concept, and by the end, Isaiah knew they'd created something powerful. Within 6 months, 43 companies had signed on as certified partners. Within a year, it was over 200. The foundation's first anniversary was celebrated with a gala that felt surreal to Isaiah. Champagne and formal wear and speeches about impact metrics and systemic change. But the moment that mattered came afterward, in a quiet conversation with a young man named Tyler Washington. Tyler was 24, a grocery store clerk who'd reported wage theft and faced immediate retaliation. The foundation had helped him fight back, recover his stolen wages, and get protections for other workers. Now he worked for the foundation as an outreach coordinator, helping other low-wage workers understand their rights. "I need to tell you something," Tyler said, pulling Isaiah aside. "Before I found your foundation, I decided I was done fighting. I was going to take the wage theft, find a different job, never speak up again. Because what was the point? The company had lawyers and money, and I had nothing." "But you didn't give up." "Because you showed me I didn't have to fight alone. And now I get to show other people the same thing. That's not just a job, man. That's purpose." Isaiah thought about that conversation later, driving home through the city he'd lived in for 8 years, but somehow saw differently now. The diner where it all started was still there, its neon still buzzing, still serving bad coffee to people working overnight shifts. He'd driven past it a dozen times since that night, but never gone inside. Tonight, on impulse, he pulled over. The interior hadn't changed. Same worn booths, same fluorescent lights, same smell of burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Doris was still working, looking older and more tired, but with the same sharp eyes. "Well, I'll be damned," she said, recognizing him immediately. "The hero returns. Not a hero, just a customer who wants bad coffee." She poured him a cup without asking, the same bitter brew he remembered. "Read about your foundation in the paper. Fancy stuff. You've come a long way from working 3 jobs. Sometimes I miss it. The simplicity. Bullshit. You were miserable, working yourself into the ground, trying to survive on nothing. Don't romanticize struggle just because the fight's different now." Isaiah smiled. Doris had always been direct. "You did the right thing that night," she continued, her voice softer. "Everyone else just sat there, including me. I'm not proud of that. But you stood up, and it cost you damn near everything. I'm glad it turned out okay." It didn't turn out okay. It turned out different. Better in some ways, harder in others. But I'd do it again. I know you would. That's why we need more people like you. Isaiah finished his coffee and left a $20 tip for a $3 cup. Outside, the city was quieting into late evening. People finishing shifts and heading home, the ordinary machinery of urban life grinding on. Somewhere in this city, someone was witnessing injustice and deciding whether to intervene. Someone was facing retaliation for speaking up and wondering if fighting back was worth it. Someone was teaching their child that doing the right thing mattered, even when it was hard. And now, because of one decision in one diner on one rainy night, there was a foundation dedicated to helping those people. Resources, support, protection. The knowledge that courage didn't have to cost you everything. Isaiah drove home to Amara, who was waiting with her homework half done and questions about the foundation's latest case. He helped her finish her math problems, listened to her read aloud from her latest library book, and tucked her in with the same routine they'd maintained through construction jobs and warehouse shifts, and now foundation work. "Dad," she said as he turned out the light, "if you could go back to that night at the diner, knowing everything that would happen after, would you still stand up?" Isaiah thought about the fear, the losses, the moments he'd wondered if he'd destroyed their lives for a stranger. But he also thought about Christina Morales and Tyler Washington and the 16 nurses and Jennifer Caldwell and all the people whose lives had changed because someone had decided to flip the equation. "Every single time," he said. "Every single time, baby girl." She smiled and closed her eyes, satisfied. Isaiah stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her sleep like he had 1,000 times before. Tomorrow he'd go back to the foundation, back to the cases and the fights and the slow, difficult work of changing culture. There would be victories and setbacks, progress and resistance, moments of hope and moments of frustration. But tonight, he was just a father who'd made a choice to stand up when everyone else sat down, and somehow that single moment had rippled outward in ways he never could have imagined. He thought about Derek Vaughn in prison, learning that consequences were real. About Graham Dawson finding purpose beyond profit. About Elena discovering that privilege came with responsibility. about all the people who'd been hurt and silenced finding their voices again. And he thought about the next person in the next diner facing the same choice he'd faced, to intervene or look away, to stand up or stay seated, to risk everything for what was right or protect yourself by staying silent. Because of what had happened in the 6 months since that rainy night, because of the foundation and the movement and the cultural shift, that person would have resources that hadn't existed before, support that could protect them from the worst consequences, a system that might actually work in their favor instead of crushing them for their courage. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't enough, but it was better than it had been, and tomorrow it would be better still. Isaiah Brooks closed his daughter's door and walked to his own room, carrying the weight of responsibility and the lightness of purpose in equal measure. He'd never set out to be a hero or a leader or the face of a movement. He'd just been a tired man in a diner who couldn't look away from someone who needed help. Everything else, the foundation, the cases, the lives changed, had flowed from that single moment of recognizing that some things mattered more than safety. And in the end, that was the only truth that counted. Not the victories or the accolades or the speeches, but the simple recognition that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to stand up anyway, to help anyway, to risk anyway, because the cost of silence was higher than the price of intervention. Isaiah turned out his light and let sleep take him, knowing that tomorrow would bring new fights and new challenges and new opportunities to help people find their courage. But tonight, he could rest in the knowledge that one man standing up in one diner had somehow started something that would outlive them all, and that was enough.